welcome. It is now 7 o'clock, and let's go ahead and get started. So we're recording, just FYI. So thank you again. Good evening. My name is Jonathan Cook. I'm the Executive Director at Solano Pride Center, and I'm excited to announce this new web series that we are offering, which is called QChat. And this is the first episode in this new series. And I'm excited to be joined by Adrian Asbin from our staff. He's our project coordinator. And then I'm also very excited to introduce you to two of my friends who are some of my guests this evening from Southern California. We have Dr. Naveen Jonathan from Chapman University. Welcome, Naveen. And we have Yashara Acosta. So thank you, both of you, for joining. I will just read a brief little bit of their bios, and we will get started. So the topic of our conversation for tonight is a continuation of our series that we've been running since the end of 2019, which is called Pride and Faith. And it's a discussion around the intersections of identity, LGBTQ identity, and communities of faith, and the complexities that exist around those two different identities. So before we get started, let me just introduce a little bit about our two guests. So Yashara Costa is a ACSW social worker therapist at a residential program for at-risk boys, and also is a fabulous musician, singer-songwriter I know very well. And we also have Dr. Naveen Jonathan. He is a clinical associate professor of marriage and family therapy and chair of the Department of Marriage and Family Therapy at Chapman University in Orange, California. All right. Well, welcome to you both. And I will let Adrian kick us off just with a little bit of an explanation about the project. So we are here virtually, but our physical space is here in Solano County in Northern California, part of the San Francisco Bay Area. And our funding for this project, it's called, I'll let Adrian explain that in a minute, is in partnership with Solano County Behavioral Health through MHSA Mental Health Service Act dollars through Prop 63, and in partnership with UC Davis through their Center for Reducing Health Disparities. So I'll let Adrian explain a little bit more about that now.
Awesome, thank you, Jonathan. So we're working with Solano County Behavioral Health with the it's called the Solano County Innovations Project, and what it's meant to do it's a project that that is kind of done to reach out to the community, reduce stigma around mental health, and hopefully with that push more folks to use the services that the county provides. And with that, the county found 3 target communities: the Filipino community, the Latinx community, and then the LGBTQ community, which they had no data on. So that's the reason why they chose us. So Solano Pride was kind of that, we were chosen to represent the LGBTQ community. And with that, with my position, what I'm doing, and with Pride and Faith, is to Jonathan kind of touched on it, is to talk about that intersectionality between being LGBTQ and having, believing in something, whether it's Christianity or some other type of religion, and how that affects mental health, and what we can do to break that down, and on both sides, right? So there's that stigma going with with religion, but there are also affirming churches out there, and affirming faith-based organizations that are allies and are willing to help the community. So I'm kind of trying to bridge that within Solano County, of course. So yeah. So welcome. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you to Shara and Naveen. I appreciate it. But yeah, no, definitely. Should we just start with questions, or what? Am I missing something, Jonathan?
No, that was a great way to frame the discussion around the project that we're working on, and just a little bit of context for our guests and for our audience. So why don't we have Naveen and Yashara introduce themselves, say a little bit about their background, and then maybe we can kick off our discussion after that. Who wants to go first?
You go first, Naveen.
Okay, sure, fine. Okay. So my name is Naveen Jonathan. I identify as a cisgendered gay South Asian male. Um, I am Jonathan already read to you like all my professional background and so forth. So I am a full-time professor at Chapman University, but I also am a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California, and also clinical supervisor of a really small, tiny private practice in Santa Ana, California, which is in Orange County, here in SoCal. Um, a couple things that I was going to say. My areas of interest and my work and how I'm connected to all of this, these topics. I do a lot of mental health work in terms of seeing individuals, couples, and families. Couples and families are areas that I'm really interested in. Um, a lot of the clients that I work with have a number of intersectional related issues pertaining to their sexual and their gender identifications, and also their faith, their culture, their ethnicity, and so forth. And so this is an area that's definitely something that's very interesting to me and something that I do clinically. In addition, I would say. Um, from a personal standpoint, it's an area that's very near and dear to me because do identify as Christian. Grew up in a family that identified as part of a Christian denomination that's very tiny. It's called the Seventh Day Adventist Church. And I was raised in that particular church, and I still identify as a member of that particular church. But you find me most oftentimes in terms of my own journey and the way that I identify as being Christian. Um, I will say also, in addition to navigating the intersections between faith and my sexual orientation, I have to throw in my cultural identity as being South Asian. My family is from India. My parents are immigrants to the United States, and so I was first generation born here in the United States. Both my parents identify as being Christian as well, and Seventh Day Adventist. My my family of origin, I have to talk about this because I'm a marriage and family therapist, is very connected in Christian churches. So both on my mother's side, my mother comes from an Episcopal background because we're Indian, and there's a whole connection with the British um, culture, and because the British ruled India for forever, for about 300 years. Um, they identify as Anglican, and my father identifies as Seventh Day Adventist. But there's a long line of church ministers, church educators, church leaders, you name it. So all of that is definitely within my connection and part of my identification. Jonathan, I wasn't sure if you wanted me to say any more, if that was good.
I think that was a great way to kick off a little bit about yourself and a good introduction. And thank you for adding those points of clarification from your professional and personal background. When I know a lot of us doing this work, the professional is often personal, and it can be kind of difficult to kind of differentiate and compartmentalize those two areas of our lives. So thank you for bringing that into the discussion. I think it's going to be helpful later. All right, Miss Yashara Acosta, would you like to talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure, why not? So I am, as Jonathan said, an ACSW, close to attaining my license and be as cool as Naveen one day. Um, Even though, social work's better than MFT, but whatever, it's neither here nor there. I'm just kidding. Um, so I am a therapist. My background has been primarily in adolescent and youth mental health, community mental health, veteran mental health. I have a military background myself. As well as Naveen, grew up in the Seventh Day Adventist denomination. I'm a pastor's kid. Um, don't mind all the rumors. Uh, I I think mental health. I was homeschooled my entire life until college. At college, I went to a private Christian school. It's what my family wanted me to do, and they suggested I go into social work because I didn't know what to do as 18. Who knows what they want at 18? I did it anyway. Um, and I went into social work because they suggested it. And honestly, it's one of the best decisions I ever made because it helped me learn and unlearn all the things that my family wasn't able to um, educate me on about mental health. And it opened up my doors and my horizons to um, the knowledge I needed to help me grow as a person individually, help me deconstruct and reconstruct the things that were hurting me. It was in college when I came out, and I do identify as genderqueer and bisexual, um, and my pronouns are she, her, um, and I think that there has been a lot of fluctuation in that, and there's a lot of my identity revolved around the fact that I had what, as an adult, I realized I had a very ideal childhood, and that cut off very abruptly when I came out at 18, and from 18 till now, it's been a very different journey, and so much deconstruction has happened, which has immediately informed my mental health um, practice because what I didn't receive, what I wasn't able to understand on a spiritual level, I was able to understand on a mental health level. And it helped me establish, help me understand people better and clients better, to have worked through that difficult time. Um, and
And
I think a
I think
lot
a
of
lot
what
of
helped me kind of formulate and develop as a therapist um, was understanding that a lot of times I still identify as a Christian, if not so much Seventh Day Adventist. Um, Even though I do still attend an Adventist church and such, I find that the community is familiar and that helps me. Um, but I think as a therapist, kind of saying, okay, well, if there's unconditional love, therapy helped me understand that the God I believe in understands me unconditionally as well, and that I can extend that to my clients, the unconditional positive affirmation, the unconditional positive regard. Um, uh, Anyways, yeah, that's a little bit about me. I was trying to go into all of it. Therapists, we talk for a living. Come on, you know what I'm talking about, Naveen. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Yashara. And I don't know if you mentioned, you said you were a service member. Would you tell the
Mhm.
audience which branch you're in and what your rank is?
So I was in the National Guard, Army National Guard, as an E4 or specialist, and I was a helicopter mechanic for 3 years, and recently got out as of 2019. It's 2020, right? Who knows what day it is? But 2019, I'm still in the Individual Ready Reserve, as it's called, but I'm back to being a civilian. So yeah, an enjoyable time of my life. Don't No regrets, but I don't know that I'd do it again.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think you both did such a fabulous job in kicking this off. I already have a lot of ideas and themes that I think we can work with just based off of what we have said in our introductions. Um, one thing that just came to mind when you were both talking is, how you came to make a decision to become a mental health professional. Like I think for myself, the work that I do, I was thinking about this and talking with my partner the other day that I was drawn to be in a helping profession because of my faith, because of my upbringing in the church, and all of those ideals and the golden rule and all of these kind of universal truths that I think, kind of blends throughout the beautiful tapestry of humanity. But I'm curious if that had a role to play and why both of you chose your career path. Do either one of you want to weigh in on that?
I'll weigh in on that. For me, it definitely did. It definitely did. I think my disposition since I was little has always been a helper mentality, and I can appreciate that my parents did see that in me, and why they said go to social work, I don't know, but specifically, but um, my like I said, I'm a pastor's kid. So my father, he was also in the military. My mother's a nurse, so they were both in helping professions, and my sister's a veterinarian, also a helping type of profession. So very help oriented. For me, when I finished my undergraduate, I remember thinking, well, this helps me help people in the best, most efficient way possible. If it helped me understand how to help people better. And I remember when there was a time when I didn't know what to do with my faith, that social work essentially became my religion, because it was the most practical way to help people. And if I felt that I was called as a Christian to help people, be the hands and feet of Jesus, if you will, then helping them find housing and helping them find food and helping them learn how to manage their own feelings and how to function as a human being in society is a pretty good way to do that. And simplifying it, it felt realistic rather than just here's a Bible, read it, and then, be a better person.
Mm.
Um, Even though the foundation of everything social work comes from a very Christian origin. Um, but for me, it was very much the golden rule, like you said, treat other people the way you want to be treated. Love your neighbor as yourself. There's no bigger rule than this. And understanding that and thinking that, like, oh, the number one thing we're supposed to do is love God and then love people. They're equal. And thinking, well, whatever you treat people, however you treat people will be how you treat God. And those concepts are drilled into me, drilled into me, drilled into me. And not because they were demanded from me, but because they just made so much sense to me, even as a child. And so as an adult, it was like, well, yeah, when we help people, we feel better, they feel better, everybody's better. So why wouldn't I do that? And engaging in that through therapy and through case management over the years, and a little bit of both at this time, because my function as a therapist overlaps somewhat with case managerial skills and needs. Um, it's a beautiful marriage of the practical and the spiritual, emotional, holistic approach, in my opinion, of helping people understand themselves and then understand their needs, because I work with individuals and with families. Um, the adolescent and their families when they're going back to live with their families. Um, so it feels like everything I learned as a young person, for me, it just felt like the best manifestation I could do that and was in this capacity. Some people feel like it's in medicine. Some people feel like it is in ministry, such as in the clergy. Some people feel that it's food, etc. And those are their gifts and those are their talents. And I find that my one time, Naveen, we had a discussion about this one time. We're talking about spiritual gifts, saying that some people have a spiritual gift of healing, and we thought, it's not just medical. It's not just, broken arm, let me help you heal that. It's not just eyesight, let me help you fix that. It's healing of the soul, the mind. And so much healing comes through talk therapy, play therapy, all kinds of therapy. And being a part of that, understanding that I get to manifest my faith and the things I learned, and built on as I got older through my work has been pretty fulfilling for me.
Mm.
My 2 cents about that.
Well, thank you for sharing, Yashara. Appreciate that. Naveen, did you kind of want to weigh in on what made
Sure,
you choose your career path? Did your
sure.
faith background influence that or inform it?
So for me, in a lot of these conversations, and when I talk about my identity and my profession and who I am and all those other kind of things, I cannot um, like talk about just faith. I have to talk about like culture, because
Hmm.
they intersect so much for me. So for me, growing up in a South Asian family, like we are, I mean, it was very collectivistic. I mean, even though the majority of my family lives outside of the United States, there's families. Um, I wouldn't. There's a pseudo family that was definitely built around me, of people that were aunties and uncles, but were not blood relatives of mine. Um, I remember distinctly that in my own journey, like there have always been individuals that taught me to, like, if somebody was in need, you give above and beyond. It's a very Indian thing that, like, somebody says, hey, I'm at your home, and like, you never let them leave without like having food. And if they're hungry, you don't even just give them the food, you give them like a meal, you give them food to take home. It's like, those kind of things. But like, the idea of being very respectful and listening is something that was really taught to me early on, and it's a very like cultural value of being very like pleasant and very personable, but you want to really make sure that the other person is hearing you. So I bring all of that because that was my journey of going into being a mental health professional, which was in high school. Like, I had friends and even like teachers around me that was like, you're really good at listening. And so, have you ever thought about going into a career of mental health? So that was my whole pattern. But I would definitely say that there's some pieces here. Um, and I've had to do my own self exploration and all of that in the South Asian community. you know at that particular time, going in and becoming a mental health professional was like, what are you doing? Because you take the problem to the collective whole of, like, the your culture, your as cultural norms, you take it to your family to deal with and not air it out. What are you doing? And then the other piece that I had to navigate very early on, but it actually was more late college when I was starting to look at like graduate schools and things like that, was that, what are you really sure that you want to become a mental health professional? And so I remember having conversations with members of my faith community, which included some members of my family, both pseudo family and parents, about like what that would look like. And if I did that, like, how would that take away, for example, from the idea that many Christians believe that you go to God to take care of all your problems and not to another human being. So, I had to navigate through a lot of those experiences. I chose going into marriage and family therapy because I had the experience. I actually got to go back to the high school that I worked at, or rather, I attended, not worked at, that I attended. And it was a faith based Seventh day Adventist high school. And I got to work with families. I got to work with students during the day, and then I got to work with parents and families like later on, like after school hours, and to consult with them and do those. And I saw the importance of looking at family of origin related issues, and also recognizing that even if we are individual, we're in relationships all the time. And we bring those relationships into all the work that we do, into our own interactions. So even if I'm working with an individual, I'm thinking about their family, I'm thinking about their work system, I'm thinking about the community, different identities and groups that they are a member of. What are the influences and the messages that they give that maybe contribute to the problem, or could be helpful, or even be a sense of support? In my graduate education, though, I started seeing a little bit more about how the faith piece came in. Um, what happened for me was that in my master's program, it's a very common in MFT's programs that you do what's called an epistemology paper or a theory of change paper, where you pick a couple of theories that you really identify with, and you mental health theories. This is, and then you look at how do you place yourself with that, what makes sense, what doesn't. So I've always gravitated towards theories that really look at the whole individual as being someone who's good, who has capabilities, who's resilient, who's strengths based, and so forth. So I practice from a very postmodern perspective. I look at clients' language. I look at the way they identify. I look at the strengths in their life, the support that they have. And I think that's really important. And in my journey, in terms of becoming an MFT and doing this particular paper and assignment, it solidified for me like the origins of why I believe in these various things. These models really like look at the person being innately good, or have the potential of being good, but things just get in the way in their life, whether that's, again, the different groups we belong to, our families, circumstances and situations, relationships. And so that was where I had this aha moment that I was like, whoa, like, being Christian and believing that God does not think of us as evil or pathological or innately bad, that we have those capabilities. I was like, whoa, that's the connection that really made sense to me and really kind of helped me go, okay, this is where it is from like my background and what I'm going to do as a professional. And so in the way that I work, I mean, I work with a lot of marginalized people. I mean, LGBTQ communities are one, but also, like, for example, with individuals who are immigrants, who are dealing with acculturation stress, oppressed, marginalized, discriminated in so many different ways. And so my ability to listen to them, respect their identities, like use their language and therapy, really kind of understand in those particular ways and find those strengths and say, hey, I believe and give you and have hope in you. All of that kind of wraps in. So I know that was a long way of getting to where to answer your question, but I hope that made sense.
No, thank you. No, I think that was great and that you were reading my mind a bit and my next question. So I'm really happy that you talked about culture because I really think that that's a large part of the work that Adrian is working on with the team through UC Davis and Solano County. But then thinking about culture in the sense that a lot of us, who identify as LGBTQ, we think of being able to just really separate because religion or our faith community or our family of origin, uh, made us make this really difficult decision that we should never have to make? Are we able to, stay with our families and our culture that we have that's wrapped up in so many things that we were raised by, whether it's the church, synagogue, temple, or whatever it is? Or you can be LGBTQ, but you can't be both, right? That's the recurring theme we hear from so many folks. And unfortunately, that's the decision that a lot of people have had to make. And then even in the LGBT community, not a lot of space is made for folks who are people of faith who observe traditions that are not as respected within the community. And so I think that cultural piece is often missed, and so I kind of wanted to have both of you dive into that a little bit deeper. Yashara, do you want to maybe unpack some of that, and then we'll go back to Naveen?
How to unmute myself again. So um, so you're asking essentially just how to culture, the impact of culture, and the separation of, like you said, one or the other, if I'm understanding the question correctly.
Yes, yes. I mean, that's part of it, and then obviously there's additional layers where it's culture. If someone has immigrated from a different country, if you are even, frankly, a lot of these faith groups are very specific in the way that their culture
Right.
is observed based on the region
Right.
they're in the
Right.
world, or even within the United States. So I think a lot of those different aspects really influence the way that we view the world, that we view our experience with the divine, and all of those things. It's all influenced through those different lenses.
Well, I'll say this. So my family is very mixed ethnically. The predominant culture is Puerto Rican. Both my parents were raised there. My mother's ethnic background, though, is African American Puerto Rican, and then my father is Puerto Rican, and my father was raised in a Catholic home. Became his father was Adventist, his mother was Catholic. His mother became Adventist. His father left the church, and so he grew up with a Catholic influence into the Adventist culture. My mother was raised Adventist, but her father was raised Baptist. Her mother was raised Adventist, very, very strict Adventist by her mother, my great grandmother. And I said that because my grandmother was kind of a loose Adventist. she didn't take it too seriously. They sent the kids to church, kind of thing, but they didn't go. And then all my uncles and aunts stopped going, and I think maybe one or one uncle stayed in and my mom stayed in. My father said that ever since he was young, he wanted to be something of the clergy, so he would have become a priest if he hadn't become a pastor in a Protestant denomination. I say that because my family's culture, at the end of the day, honestly, the predominant culture, and I remember doing something like what you were talking about, just kind of defining what your family background, where you come from. I remember sitting that and doing that in undergrad and going, my family's predominant culture is Adventist, not Puerto Rican, not African American, not any of the other cultures. It was a religious culture that was the predominant. Everything was filtered through that. How we dance, how we eat. They became vegetarian. No dancing in public. What we watch, how we talk. No drinking, no smoking, no this, no that. It was very Adventist lifestyle, which is not bad in and of itself. It's very healthy. It's very collectivistic. It's community oriented, health oriented, and education oriented. There was no questions about me getting a master's. It was when, not if. But the other side of that is the expectations were very, very rigid. And I wouldn't call my family conservative. I'd call them moderate conservatives. They lean conservative, but I would call them moderate conservatives. And also growing up in a Hispanic household, which influences that on another layer, meaning growing up in Spanish churches, it wasn't just conservative Adventism, it was Hispanic conservative Adventism, which adds a layer of like how you dress. So women, I've been sent home from a church to change out of pants into a skirt or a dress that went past my knees. I've been sent home, not by my family. This was when I was in college. I went to church. I was supposed to sing that day, and they're like, you're wearing pants," and I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "No, you can't go on stage like that." And I've been sent home. So there's that layer too. And I will say that if you've ever been to a Hispanic church, this does not apply as a blanket statement to every last person out there, but I've learned, as many might learn going to a conservative Caucasian church, that conservative Hispanic churches are very, very judgmental. So they'll take everything and they'll nitpick and they'll tear you apart to see if you're doing everything right according to their personal opinions and views. So growing up with that, I observed my mom disliked that because as a child she was raised with the exact same thing. If you're wearing pants, you're going to go to hell. And she has she had an animosity against that, and so she didn't like us being exposed to that. So she actually preferred non-Hispanic churches for that reason, because of her experiences and because of our experiences as pastors' kids, and the intense light shone on us in that role as the pastor's family. So that culture was the one that impacted me, because Puerto Rican culture didn't matter. It had nothing to do with being queer. Like Hispanics are like weird about it, and they had the machismo about it, but it was less of an issue than you're gonna burn in hell, which is interesting because I was not raised in a burn in hell kind of mentality in my family. It was more like you're sinning and you're turning your back on God. But we don't believe in a current hell. The Adventist faith doesn't preach a current hell or an eternal hell. It preaches a temporary, at the end of time hell. And so it wasn't like God is gonna hate me so much and then destroy me and I'll be gone, and he's gonna enjoy it and ha ha ha, God is evil and wrathful and that's it. It was more like God's sad that you're bad. The way it informed me was that I was still going to church because I thought you can't not go to church. And especially in college during the beginning of my coming out experience. And culturally, again, Latinos are collectivistic. So when I came out to my parents, they stepped back from me. And it became a long journey from 18 till very recently of arm's length family, which I didn't understand. Because we were very holidays together, birthdays together, everything's together. You're always together. You're always a bond. But they had essentially pushed me out of the family without saying so, and judged me and told me that they would, I was turning my back on God, and they would essentially invalidate my spiritual journey. And it was the way that they were dealing. And I'm at a place, we're in a much better place now, but it took a very long time of working through things and forgiveness on my end, and realization that their faith is in God's hands just as much as mine is in God's hands. And while they still are not supportive of any of that, we've come to neutral territory, if you will, or we just don't talk about it. And I respect their decision, and I've told them often, they say, I don't criticize your beliefs, so I ask you not to criticize mine, and that's kind of where we're at. I'm not, you
Mm.
have your convictions and I have mine, and I actually respect you for having convictions. I'd rather that. And you have your reasons. I don't agree with them, but that's okay. I'm not gonna fight about why we believe what we believe. I'm simply going to have discussions with you as calmly and as um, amicably as possible. And where we disagree, let there be disagreement. Because I think, again, if the Adventist culture teaches the love of God more so than anything else, then that has to be the last word of anything. Um, but that honestly has been the biggest informant of my culturally of my coming out process, of but the deconstruction I did of the Adventism and its anti-gay approach, if you will, has been to understand that God accepts everybody and anybody and will work with you on an individual basis, whatever God's will for you is. There has to be a personal conviction, and that has informed my therapy so much, because any work I do with an individual comes from a here's what's good for you, and here are outcomes, and you are a free agent in the universe, and I will have unconditional love for you regardless of your decision, because your decisions are not the what I base my care for you on. You don't come to me and I go, well, I'm disappointed in you, so I'm not going to do therapy with you today. It's not how God approaches prayer. Like, oh, well, you didn't listen, so I'm just not going to listen to you today. It's okay. How do we work through this? It's okay. How do we work through this? And uh, because that's what I feel that I have experienced spiritually. Anything that I've done, or places where I feel I have um, failed myself and betrayed myself and my needs and my health, I feel that my spiritual relationship, whether I was paying attention to it or not, there are times I stepped away from my faith, and those were rough times where I felt like, okay, spiritually, I don't need God. It is what it is. I would step away from my faith and completely, rather than just the unhealthy parts that were hurting me. I would just step away completely, throw the baby out with the bathwater, and those parts were some of the hardest times of my life. And when I'd
Mm.
step back in and was able to say, no, 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 let's reconstruct. We deconstructed. So how do we reconstruct? What am I basing anything on? I need to believe in something, because it felt very aimless. Um, and I've developed my own culture. I like to say, instead of, oh, I'm bicultural, or I'm my cultural, whatever my culture is, because I find myself adapting to so much and enjoying so much about so many cultures. And every family, as we know in family studies, that every family has a subculture, every individual has subcultures, and if you come from a family, you get married, you have kids, you could create another subculture. Those kids are part of
Mhm.
a subculture with their adolescents, their peers. So I love cultures, I love studying them. As Naveen was saying earlier, it just informs so much, so much about the person. You understand where they're coming from, their views. Code switching, I work with adolescents who are the majority are gang affiliated, and we discuss code switching between rules in your home, rules in your gang, rules with your peers in placement, and rules with staff. So they're switching between homie code, and switching between the language you have to use with a police officer, and the language with staff, and the language with the therapist, which is kind of a mix of all of them. And it's very hard, because they feel like there's one set of rules that teaches them one thing, and another set of rules that teaches almost the exact opposite. Trust no one, but trust your family. You know, be loyal, but forget everybody but your home. And it's so contradictory in so many ways. And I feel like in the queer um, realm, the queer folk have a difficulty with that so much as well, trying to code switch between, when I'm talking to my parents, there's so much I don't talk about. And because culturally it makes them so uncomfortable, and it's just something that for them it's wrong, and it's so ungodly. And then for me, it's something that in my personal experience, has been what as a catalyst for me to experience God further. But because of my Christian faith and understanding where they're coming from, one thing we agree on is to not be stumbling blocks to people. And so I leave that out so that I'm not something that gets in the way between their faith and God, because to me, that's more important than who I'm crushing on.
Mm.
And I'm not trying to simplify that. I'm not saying it's just me crushing, because you know, if you talk to, I was reading this article about how not getting haircuts right now because of quarantine is hell for a lot of, you know, masculine identifying butch type people and female people, because, and I relate to that, because without a haircut, I feel like I'm going crazy. I went and shaved my own head and it did not come out too good. But,
It looks pretty
but
good. It looks
thanks,
good.
because this is covering what happened, what went wrong. It's all good. But first time I did it, so I'm proud. But the little things that help us be us, our identity is so, you know, encapsulated in certain things, how we dress, how we express ourselves, the language we use with each other. And it may be as silly as, yes, honey, don't worry about it, queen. You say that somewhere else and somebody doesn't get it, they're like, huh? And you're like, right, you're the wrong group of people.
Yeah.
I can't talk around you. I can't express myself around you. It's the same way for people who are conservative or moderate Christians, or any group of Christians outside that disagree with queer folk. It can be very difficult for them. So if you're in the middle, if you're in between that, you're code switching nonstop, code switching nonstop. And so that's so difficult for anybody who's code switching, period. But when the code switching is between being considered good and bad, that's like an extra weight. It's like an extra weight. Oh, that I don't even know what question I was answering anymore, but I went on a tangent, girl.
No, that was great. There was so much goodness. I'm just like, I have to, you know, I'm glad we're recording this, because I'm like, there's stuff I want to unpack, and just, you know, we're going to revisit this. We're just going to call this part one. All right. Naveen, before we go to Adrian for another question, did you want to touch on that a little bit? How we were talking about culture and its impact, and our identities, those systems that we navigate, and how, you know, that intersection between LGBTQ identity, communities of faith, and, you know, the overall topic of this conversation is how it impacts our mental health and well-being.
So, okay, I'll try to get all
Yeah,
that
yeah.
in. Okay, so, you know, reflecting back first, because I always, you know, as I started off by like talking about and thinking a little bit about one's family of origin, really kind of like helps me to organize my own thoughts and think about how white is I think about or do what I need to do. So, even though so my family is South Asian, my family is Indian, and also we're Christian. So I have to think also a little bit about what all of those things mean first, because that was how I was raised and how I was, you know, it was always, you know, your and I didn't know sometimes which came first. Sometimes it was the cultural piece and sometimes it was the faith piece. And, you know, I think about what all of that means. Like for my family, I recognized so much, like there have been different people who have thought differently or practiced differently. And there's even been some of my relatives who have left Christianity. And it was very shocking a lot of the time. And, you know, again, in the work I've done, I've had to do a lot of self exploration of myself and my family. I recognize that, like, being Christian in India, my family's from the big city. And so there's a lot of other different religions and so forth. But Hinduism is the predominant religion. And as India has evolved, you know, in terms of like becoming like an economic powerhouse and like an IT powerhouse and all those other kind of things in the last like 10 to 15 years, like there's still parts of India, especially like rural parts of India, that if you're not Hindu and you identify as a different religion, I mean, you know, you're subject to persecution. And so when I think about, like, for example, my grandparents' generation and how, like, both of my grandfathers were ministers and some of the things that they had to endure and those stories, like, it was really important to maintain your faith in that way. And so that was there. But I always grew up with this part of, like, there was the faith, but then there was the culture, and they often intermix. So it was almost like you're doing your own form of like identity, and like you always were just like which came first and which didn't, and they all just kind of meshed together.
Mm,
So there were those pieces. But then when I think about my own identity, and coming out as a gay man, both communities are very, both identities are very much not accepting of that. So like I had the cultural pieces that I had to navigate, and also the faith-based pieces. And sometimes I'm like, again, I don't know. And then those that identified as both, I was like, oh my gosh, like trying to make sense of all of that was just ridiculously complicated. Um, and so, I had to think about what were the similarities and the differences, and like the similarities especially around family and like having children and doing all those different kind of things are very important in Indian culture. And then there's sense of family that's also important, like in Christianity. So like how do I navigate some of those pieces? um but in my cultural community, a lot of the pieces around secrecy, it's collectivist. And so the idea of you being out and being open and being different and standing apart from your
mm,
family of origin, and also, is that a rejection of your culture in some particular way?
right.
And so being able to navigate that, but then being out too, is that also a sign of like, you like not following faith-based practices and all that. I had to find spaces that basically I could navigate both. And so, being able to meet people that, like, for example, are part of my culture, and also identify as queer, and then also finding people that also are from my faith base and identifying as such. I mean, those were really important in terms of my identity, but also sustaining who I am. I know very few. I'm talking very few. I'm talking, I can count like maybe on one hand, of people who identify as both South Asian and Christian and gay.
Mm,
It is very difficult. I mean, here in Southern California, unlike you guys up in the Bay Area, like the Bay Area has a huge South Asian LGBTQ community, and that continues to grow. Here in Southern California, there's some, but not as much. But even in these spaces, I have rarely found someone who has all of those identities. So at times it can feel isolating. And I think about
mm,
that also for some of the work I do as a mental health professional, when how important those spaces are, but even within those spaces, how you can still feel like isolated, because the South Asian community and the LGBT community, the South Asian LGBT and Christian communities oftentimes want you to be very siloed off in many ways. And so when you're in these spaces, like how do you operate? So like, for example, um, I've been in relationships where like I've dated someone, and and a partner would say something such as like, I don't understand why you do this, and then there's this lack of like connection, and then you're like, wait, what's happening? How do I navigate that? But even forget even romantic relationships, even in friend groups, it's kind of like, why is this important or why is that important? And so, those kind of things, I really see the importance of why people look for and want to find support of people who are similar to them, because again, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like there's another person like me that has
mm,
all of these different intersections, and it's like it validates my experience.
absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that, that personal component of it as well. I think that segues nicely into one of the next questions I saw that I think Adrian might ask. So I'll turn it over to Adrian for the next question or two.
Well, actually, I wanted to modify my question a little bit.
Sure, sure, sure.
So I appreciate everyone, all y'all are talking about. I think it's amazing, and I really wanted to touch upon, talking about all these, intersectionalities between being LGBTQ, being a person of color, having a faith, and whether or not that faith is culture. I mean, it could be like Yashar kind of touched upon. There's so many different cultures out there, and that could change with whoever that person is with, whatever the environment is, right? So one thing I wanted to relate to with or going into like the mental health portion, how does someone deal with kind of, you know, that sense of, like Naveen said, wanting to belong, but at the same time, you know, how does someone deal with the traumas and with, you know, that, you know, maybe that contradicts, yeah, in that area. So how would you go about kind of reducing that stigma, like I talk, right? Reducing that, and helping that person kind of cope with, you know, you know, wanting to belong to something that may not 100% agree with them, or, you know, do you see what I'm saying, or you know, so yeah, yeah, that's my question in a way, unless Jonathan wants to add anything.
Well, no, I think that was a good way of kind of framing it. You know, that, you know, I'm sure the work that both of you do is, you know, trauma informed care, and you know, trauma is such a source. Or I'll back up and say this: communities of faith are often such a source of trauma for LGBTQ identified people. And, you know, I think that, you know, having to make some of those difficult decisions about, you know, your family of origin, whether or not they're accepting, whether your, you know, faith community is welcoming, affirming, or are they just happy to have you sit there on the pew and give them some money every week? I mean, you know, those type of different things. And then also the, you know, the backlash and stigma that exists on the, you know, the other end of the spectrum and the LGBT community, where it's like, why do you still subscribe to that? Why don't you just throw that away? Or they'll, you know, dismiss and be very invalidating about cultural concerns. You know, all different types of cultural and systems that folks are raised in. So yeah, I mean, I think any of those aspects that you kind of want to unpack, but I think uh, Adrian mentioned, you know, specifically for, you know, queer people of color, queer trans people of color. You know, Naveen, you mentioned that, you know, in Southern California, you experience, you know, you don't encounter a lot of folks who are just like you. And, you know, I notice that as a white man, a white gay man, too often in queer spaces, there's too many people that look like me. And, you know, I want to hear more from both of you about your perspective, your experience, and, you know, how you navigate that.
Okay. Okay. I'm trying to think how which direction I want to go with this. It's to answer Adrian and Jonathan. Like, I'm going to talk about this from the personal and the professional, both in different ways. I, in my own journey, I kept looking for that person that had all of the similar identities. And that was just my own, because that was the way that I was thinking and I operated and everything when I, like, you know, like, came out, like, in my 20s, in my early 20s. And, like, for me, I soon discovered that that was not going to be the case, but, like, that I would ideally find that. And so, like, I had to find ways that I could be parts of various spaces that I would get various needs met. So, for example, like, you know, I was involved with several LGBT Christian groups, including one where I served on their board of directors. And so, like, you know, that gave me the piece of, like, identifying with people who had a similar background with faith. Similarly, it wasn't with leadership, but I did engage with the Southern California. We have a South Asian LGBTQ group here. And so, you know, I was able to get, like, some of the needs met in different places. Um, One of the things that I think has been challenging is when you do hit up on those intersections, and it's like, how do you explain and how do you navigate those things? Because it's not clear. And I'm just going to be very upfront and honest and vulnerable because, like, I live my life as an open book. I think one of the biggest things that I have felt, like, in terms of a lack of acceptance, is within LGBTQ communities, because I find myself that I'm an extrovert. I like talking to people and everything like that. So I meet different groups of people, but when they start finding out about me and they find out that that I identify as Christian, it's almost like a like stop, what's going on? Why? So I've encountered comments such as like, why do you still believe that? That's so archaic. I can't believe this. And I've had some people who feel like I've actually had people who've told me that I'm triggering to them in some way because I identify in that way, and I'm like, I have had to stop and go, you know, it's part of who I am. I can't disconnect that. It's part of my values, part of my beliefs. And so, when I encounter somebody else and you don't fit, I don't fit for you, then I have to think about, what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm going to continue on in that friendship, or, so that you get to know me and you realize that I'm not going to, I don't know what you thought I would do. Would I like proselytize or like, I don't know what you thought I was going to do, to you. Or is it something where I have to back off and say, wow, so you know, there's been some judgment that's there. And I understand and recognize, because of the community that I might identify with and my faith and value system, that you feel unsafe with me. So I have to accept that, and like and I do, but it's not easy. And at times your feelings get involved with it. I mean, I'm going to be also completely vulnerable. I mean, it's also gotten in the way where I've met guys that I'm like, wow, this is deep connection, and then all of a sudden they're like, you know what, I don't think I could, I can't even, I'm going, I'm not even telling you that you have to believe the same way that I do, but it's just not. So for me, my experience has been a little bit less positive in that way, in queer spaces. But I, I'm the extrovert in me still just goes, okay, I guess those people just, I'm gonna keep going, and get my needs met. And so I bring this to the professional because I work with clients and I say, okay, so like the trauma pieces that come in, like for me, I feel like I need to address those trauma pieces first as a therapist, but I always go at my client's pace. Sometimes I have clients who come in and it's like, for example, religious trauma or cultural trauma, or like, intersections of both, that are there. I need to look at those and I need to work with them. But at the same time, I have some people who are like, while I'm working on these things, I also need support, or I want to have connection, like, you know, and then so then I say, all right, well, how do we do that? Let's talk about these things. Like, where would that connection be? Would it be within these various groups? What are some of the groups that you might want to have wanted to interact with? What are some of the? Do you have a cultural broker that could kind of give you that segue in? That could be that safe person, maybe your wingman, that could kind of go along with you. Or, you want to do it by yourself, and then I work with them, talk with them, prep them, to see how those places might be. Um, I find some of them have had similar experiences to me, where they've said, I don't feel safe as a person of color in LGBTQ spaces, or I'm going to a faith-based space, and as an LGBTQ person, I don't feel safe. So how do you navigate that? Sometimes I've had to sit, and I mean, operate from the place where I want the space in therapy to be the client's and not my own. But my own self journey and exploration, and the experiences I've had have given me empathy when a client comes in and says, I went to this, like cultural or faith or queer space, and I didn't feel accepted, or I didn't feel like I connected with anybody. And then so I'm like, well, what was that like for you? Do you want to return to that space? Do you want to try another, um, how do you navigate that? And I want to say this because I think this is important too. Sometimes even going to these spaces and experiencing like either not fitting in or feeling rejected can also reactivate those traumas that you have experienced, sometimes from the same group and sometimes from another group altogether. And so like being able to work together in those ways, I think, are as important, and explore. And sometimes someone will try a particular space and they're like, nope, not doing that for, and so then we talk about, okay, what would the right conditions be if you want to, explore that space. And I will say this too, especially when it comes to like relationships and dating and all of that, like so many people, like, they're like, well, I really want to, but I don't feel safe here, and here's all the things. So as a therapist, I'm like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about like in those specific places, maybe even role play, like what this experience will be like. I mean, all of that I think is helpful. So yeah.
Thank you so much. That was
Did you have a follow-up question, Adrian, or did you want to?
No, I mean no. So no, I really appreciate that. Because it's really interesting because we talk about the trauma that religious organizations kind of do on folks, but recently, especially since I started this project, it's been what you've experienced, Naveen, is more a lot of LGBTQ folks. A lot of our community is more against that, right? So against being religious of any sort, they're like, oh no, stay away. So that's really cool that you bring that up. I was just noting. So thank you.
And sorry, I'm just going to add one more thing here. I was going to say, with any marginalized group too, I think part of the things that we also have to keep in mind is the society that we're living in, and how when whatever identity doesn't come across as the dominant identity. Now, I recognize I have privilege by identifying as Christian and identifying as a cisgendered male. The other groups that I identify with, I mean, just again, based on where society is and access and, identity and all those other kind of things, really want to claim you as part of their own. And in many cases, and when you don't have that, I think many times they're like, it'd be easier to kind of like just, he's not exactly one of us, so we'll just kind of he's adjacent, and
Yeah.
I've seen that, like, whether that's been in queer spaces or Christian spaces or even like cultural spaces where it's like, yeah, he's one of us, but it's like it doesn't help our cause, kind of a thing. And I'm like, wow, that's so sad, because many of us have so many different all of us have so many different identities and pieces of us that we're not, I mean, all of those places make up who we are rather than just one identity. So anyways, I just wanted to throw that in.
Well, thank you. Yeah. One of the things I've been thinking about is, like these systems that we operate in and the different levels, layers of oppression, and the trauma that we experience. Just as a disclaimer for the audience, I also grew up and was raised in the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, like Naveen and Yashara. And I've also been thinking, like, that denomination specifically, but not so dissimilar from others. It's not just that LGBTQ people are not welcome. It's also it's sexism. Women are still not welcome to be full participants as ministers, or what we would call pastors. Just very much. And I also think about this denomination as being an American-centric denomination, like the LDS, the Mormons. It stemmed out of the United States and really had that colonizing effect around the globe, and all of the horrible ways you can imagine.
Well,
So,
remarkably growing so exponentially around the world, which is interesting because it takes those views, like you said, colonizing, and it takes those views and adds them as a filter for other cultures to operate through. And again, like I was saying earlier, some things are very great, like health, and we, medically, educationally, and then those other things, the negatives go along with it, though. And so it's all one big amalgamation of information and filters and ways to see the world, and it's pushed onto people, any group, whether it's religious, political, cultural, whatever. It gets pushed onto another group of people, without them being able to express their own views freely, taking away that right. It's never a positive outcome.
right, and that the way that heteronormative views from these large systems and structures, it keeps women down, it keeps LGBT people down, people of color, people from different countries, right? And so, thinking of those different systems of oppression, when we're working with in the LGBT community, we have so many different intersections of these identities that we're working with, that we're working from, that inform the work and experiences that we have. And, frankly, the trauma, I think, for myself, my experience is going to be different than it is for Adrian or for Naveen or for Yashara. But I'm glad that we're talking about this because, my colleagues, some of the executive directors at LGBT centers around the country are just like, why do you have a faith component to the work that you're doing? Isn't that, a lot of you have limited amount of time and you're spending some of your resources on that. But I'm glad that Adrian's incorporated this into his work plan as part of the work that we're doing to reduce the stigma around accessing mental health, because so many times, from my therapist friends and specifically from an LGBT lens, that this trauma is specifically stemming from these experiences and those two intersections of identity. Um, so thank you for sharing what you have already. One of the things, oh, sorry, did you have something you wanted to say really quick?
I did, because
Yeah.
it made me think so much of, when I had to face the question, like, which one do I give up? And decision was, it was like, well, neither. They're both realities. And you try to let go of one, it doesn't make sense. You try to let go of the other, and then it doesn't make sense either. So it's okay. How do I make these coexist? It makes me think of clients I've had who have such damaged relationships with their parents, right? Let's say their mother was abusive, but they want their mother. And it's that idea of, why do I still want the person who hurt me? And it's that understanding, and it takes time to get to the point where, because no, we need to deconstruct the things that hurt us and then reconstruct with something that's healing and helpful and true. Because a lot of the stuff that's hurting us is false. They are the lies that we're being fed through religion's lens. Again, religion is not the issue. It's usually the people that are operating. It's like saying, oh, any one political framework or any one community framework is wrong. No, it's how people operate it. You know what I mean? You can use a computer to hack into a system and rob people, or you can use it to disseminate education and knowledge to help young women excel and to equal to their counterparts. So we put too much. It's not a bad religion a lot of times as much as it's bad people. Because, and I say this because there are people who are selfish, want to obtain power and control over others, and so they create modes of operation in which to manipulate and coerce other people to their will because it benefits them, and they become opportunists in that way. That being said, the very religion that they may utilize to hurt other people can be the very religion that saves them and tells them to stop hurting people. Because the dynamics and the teachings, as a Christian, I believe that the people who led the religion of Jesus's time were trying to obey the laws given by religion, but they used it to kill the very person that made the laws. So that can show you how backwards the use of religion is, how backwards the love for somebody who hurts you is. In human terms, the people who hurt you, yes, they did hurt you. If you were abused physically, sexually, in any way, mentally, emotionally by a parent, that person abused you. The church can abuse you because of the power that they give themselves, because the people in charge utilize the power that they were given in order to help. The same way an agency, a nonprofit, can ask for donations and donations and donations and then spend it on their, the CEO goes on my vacation in the Bora Bora, and then you're going, wait a minute, where'd all the charity money go? You can ask, a good organization can ask for good things and then use it in bad ways because one person used it in the wrong way. So people use religion to attack the queer community when they are part of the community. And to me, it is the most backwards thing in the world for people who claim being the body of Christ, the most gentle soul who ever lived, and who was gracious and compassionate and wanted to heal people. That's like calling a Martin Luther King, a member of the KKK. It's just the most backwards thing in the world, because you go, that he was literally the opposite, the most opposite thing that they could be. Compassion and caring and come to me, anybody, versus go away. The very thing that tells you to come is telling you to go away. It doesn't make sense. So I feel for people, and I myself, and somebody who has felt pushed out of my own community. To this day, the church I go to, I'm so grateful for it because it's so accepting and embracing. But to this day, I am scared, genuinely scared of visiting any other church because of the mental gymnastics it takes to remember what it is to acclimate to a context. I remember a pastor had asked me to. I'm sorry. Do you see me? Oh,
Yep.
trying to fix the screen. A pastor had asked me to speak to his congregation about my journey as a queer person in a conservative church. And I remember I went, wait, what do I do again? How do I dress again? How do I do this conservative get up? Because my thing was like, okay, if I was gonna go, my logic was, if I was gonna go to a mosque, I would respect the culture enough to go dressed the way they asked me. If it was a head covering, if it was a synagogue, I would cover my head. If I'm going to go to a conservative Adventist church, I'm going to wear clothes that are respectful of their beliefs. And so I went, and I remember a few people were just like, this is awesome, this is great, so thankful for you coming. And some other people were like, well, I'll keep praying for you. And I just remember I was just like, twitch, alrighty then. And then I just went, right, but this is the point. This is the work you do, the education part of it. Just like in therapy, you can't just go to somebody and be like, it's okay. I know your mom said that she should have had an abortion and she doesn't care about you, and that she should have, killed you when she had a chance, and says very violent, horrible things. And these things I've heard parents say to their kids. And the kid is brokenhearted because of the things their parents saying, wishing they were dead. That's their parent. And somehow there's a deep part of them that goes, but this is my mom, I still want her. So that is the tearing apart experience that some people have when you're trying to take away their religion from them, because it's also the very thing that they've come to love, and that they think is beautiful, and that they think is lovely, and is the God that loves them. So when you try to take that away and force it from them, you're asking them to give up themselves as much as anybody who is not a Christian, who does not believe, is telling them to give up their sexuality or their experience and their expression. It is the same thing, and we have to respect that and understand that and come from a place of, tell me more. Tell me why it is like that. Tell me how I can support your faith and your queer experience and your identity, and how we can work through that together, because we're all so multifaceted. It's ridiculous. We're beautiful, multifaceted beings. And the more we can enjoy each other's experience, I have friends that were just like, I don't get it, I love you. The end. Let's go get a burrito. Like, I don't get it. Let's go. I have way more friends that have left the church than have stayed in, that have queer experiences. And the ones I've talked to, the reasons are so valid. And I go, I wouldn't stay there either. But I've had straight friends that have left churches for similar reasons of judgment and criticism, for other completely non-sexual related reasons.
Right.
So, it's not limited to our community, but it is something that, if we can take the time to appreciate and celebrate each other more, including the people we disagree with, exploring that and understanding that, I don't encourage my kids to be in gangs, but I go, okay, tell me about your gang. Why does it matter to you? Why is it so important to you? I need you to educate me. And then I'll try to educate you. Let's educate each other, because that's what an unconditional positive regard experience looks like, That's my tangent. All right.
No, I loved all of that. One of the things that came to mind when you were speaking was, we have kind of a coalition of different clergy and faith leaders that we're working with here in the county. And it's from all different ends of the spectrum. We have the Episcopalians, who are they're great, they're on board. They have the rainbow flag above their church 365 days of the year. And that was the issue, that was like, we're a welcoming and affirming church, but do we really have to have the flag up all year long? Maybe just for Pride Month, so I'm like, I wish I had your problems. And then, the other side of the spectrum is, great people who are willing to meet with you perhaps, but, like Adrian reached out to a Catholic priest from one of the local parishes, and he was hesitant to meet with him because of fear of what his parish or I'm forgetting the terms. The organization would judge him, or his job could be endangered, quite frankly. And so it's that kind of lack of awareness of the harm that institutions can have, because we're all fearing for our jobs, and we're doing good things, yet we're just trying to be incrementalist and not really rock the boat. And I understand that to a big extent. But then also when you were talking, I was thinking about within the queer community, there's this quest for community. I think that's the beautiful thing that we've been able to show as a community and as a movement, is that we've been able to create our families of choice. And I like something, this isn't a statement of an endorsement or anything like that, but this, Naveen mentioned the current political climate that we're in. I think that absolutely informs a lot of the experiences that we are having currently. One of the things that I liked from this presidential primary was something that Pete Buttigieg, the first out LGBT person to run for president and to win a contest, whether or not you agree with his platform policies, whatever, I think that's a cool thing. But one of the things that stuck with me from what he said was, we need a politics of belonging, and that's something that I think is so desired for within the LGBT community, is that we're looking for meaning in our lives, we're looking for a sense of community, a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging. And often when folks are shut out from traditional community, from church, from temple, from mosque, whatever it is, it's kind of that void, and that the way that we kind of compartmentalize and close that off, and the way it impacts our health. With that in mind, I kind of wanted to talk about just generally what kind of those impacts are, and those health disparities are for mental health for the queer community. But then I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that there's this global pandemic, and we're all sheltering at home, and that in and of itself has
There
a
is? I
huge
hadn't
impact on
heard.
our mental health. At least it has an impact on mine. I'm an extrovert. I like to go outside. I like to be around my friends, my staff, and my community. So yeah, I mean, I kind of want to see how we can unpack those themes. So I guess first with like the mental health, the disparities caused by being I don't want to say shunned, but not being the dominant group in a lot of these faith traditions, how that impacts our mental health. And then I guess if you wanted to talk about the current climate we're in, whoever wants to go.
Well, I'll say this, that my church community is my biggest community. Several of us are queer. One of my best friends that I go to church with, he's queer, and then there's people in all dynamics, trans, straight, but so understanding and loving, and the pure joy of experiencing each other on multiple levels, educating each other. My friends that are straight, they'll ask me like, well, what's that experience like? I've brought partners to church, and they've experienced that community and seen that, and it's been a new community for them sometimes, and they enjoy that because it's the mission statement of the church is all are welcome, because we think heaven's going to be as diverse, so why wouldn't we practice that here, and not having that, not being able to meet, has affected me, because that safe space feels taken away. It's the place where all of me is recognized, so none of it is. I remember back when I met you guys, Jonathan and Naveen, I remember we were part of this Christian queer organization, and I remember just meeting everybody, because the vast majority, if not everybody, was part of the Seventh, or had been part of the Seventh-day Adventist denomination. And I remember just thinking, everybody's like this, so no one is. Nobody stands out, is the idea. You're not a sore thumb. You're not some oddity. And there was such a sense of belonging at that time, that it was so new to me, and I was just like, it's it's amazing. I don't feel like an outcast or ostracized or odd man out, all those things. And so when the collective is so focused on one thing together, their spirituality and their wholeness, because spirituality affects all of you, um, that unity, the sharing of a meal together, the encouraging each other in every little single detail of each other's lives, straight, queer, doesn't matter, love life, family life, finances, talking about all of it, that's your community, and all of you are there for each other. I miss that. I miss the sense of understanding. Somebody can ask me about my love life and also ask me about, how work is going and what chapter of the Bible I've been reading, like all in one sentence, and it doesn't feel cut up. It doesn't feel compartmentalized. It doesn't feel like you have to be. You can be raw. You can be vulnerable, and that's where the most growth happens. When you can be so vulnerable with people that you all of you is seen and all of you is loved. I see you, you see me, and we connect and we love those. We love the dark parts, we love the light parts, we love all of it, and we're here on this road together. I don't need to compartmentalize some of you to accept you as other communities I've experienced have done. Even that of my own family, there are just certain things we don't talk about, as I was mentioning before. So knowing that you don't have to bite your tongue, that anything you do is out of complete respect for the other person, those things. At work, you're a therapist, and I appreciate that, and it's a big part of me. But my Christian identity is not something that, it's neither here nor there. They're not worrying about it. It's a big focus on the mental health of kids. And if kids want to talk about it, then we get to talk about it. But because of our role, we don't get to push anything. I'm not here to proselytize anyway, not in that way. But it's not one of those things you just bring up. But I feel like this time where people's communities have been affected so deeply, especially there are friends that I know that was their actual only community. A friend of mine who goes to church with you, that was his only group context. And he is a queer man and he's single, and it's that's where he went for his sense of belonging and help with his social anxiety. He was coming out of his bubble, and he's been doing so well in that community because how accepting and loving, and he's been wanting to grow as a Christian, and he's been wanting to understand other aspects of spirituality and his sexuality and how they interact. And so those questions were being answered, and for that to be just taken away all of a sudden was a big impact on him. And so I'm sure there's so many people going through that, where I don't know many churches where trans people can go and be 100% accepted. My denomination or any other denomination.
Yeah.
And so again, my specific community, not having that has been very hard for people. We had a significant amount of trans people at our church, and it was just a lovely, lovely community. So not seeing each other, not engaging, not having that support when it was difficult enough, having it, but it got you through the week, You had your people, it got you through the week. And just having to step away from that, the grief that we're experiencing collectively is new and different for a lot of us, and it's reminiscent of I've seen it reminiscent of 9/11. We all didn't know what to do, and we all just kind of reacted the best way we knew how. That collected that wide of a range here in the US, but this is even bigger because it impacts the whole world. So seeing that hurts my heart, seeing that. And especially with people who have questions about why is this happening, for me, my spirituality has helped me through it and feel at peace, where for others, it's causing them anxiety. Because it has everything to do with mentality. Again, you can both believe a same concept, but have different lens on about how you relate with it and absorb it, if you will. But that's kind of how I've been seeing it.
Well, thank you. Naveen, did you want to mention some of the mental health disparities that kind of are present for a lot of LGBT folks, just generally. But I mean, if you've encountered anything with your practice or in your experience around, faith specific trauma.
So, some of the places that I've seen, especially when these issues emerge, now I will say it like this too, especially when there's complex intersectional issues that are there
Mm,
with more than one identity, or I'm sorry, more than two identities. Um, that puts the person as being more susceptible to mental health related issues. Um, so some of the things that you see, like higher rates of depression for sure. um in some cases, anxiety that can be there as well, depending on the space that I'm in. Who can I talk to? How do I express myself? All of those kind of things. Substance abuse issues that definitely emerge, like, as especially as a means of coping, and in
Mm,
some cases also as a means of trying to fit in, as well. I've seen some of that. Because I'm a marriage and family therapist, relational issues. Like, I love working with couples and families. Um, I think it's the extrovert in me. The more people in the room, I'm all like, "Oh yes, like just bring it on." And so like I see that too on a relational end of things as well. So where I see relational problems as well. So, my one partner coming in with that's having depression and anxiety, and the other partner trying to assist. Sometimes maybe they connect, sometimes they don't. And in some cases where like there may be a lack of understanding with one partner over the other, like I've worked with others with couples where one partner is like, why don't you just give this up, like, this particular identity, or like cut that off, and the other partner is like, no, what's wrong with you? That's not something I can do. And trying to merge those kind of things. But then that also impacts, like, for example, relational strife that impacts, like, for example, conflict in the relationship, like more issues that emerge, visibility as a couple that can, then also impact like the relational strength. And also, I've seen, because some of the work that I do, I'm not a certified sex therapist, but I do work with individuals and couples around issues of intimacy. Um, I see even just the expression of connection with sex also that could even be impacted as well, because again, if you already have that relational strife that is there, I mean, that's going to impact also the ability to connect intimately as well. So all of that, I think, are some of the things. But like I said, especially if there's complex intersectional issues that are there, you see that happening much more often.
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Um, and then just being mindful of time, I only have a few more questions, but just from both of you, what are some coping tips that you have for self care during staying at home due to COVID-19? Anything that just has worked for you, or anything that you've found that is kind of innovative?
So, one of the things I would say about this is, and Jonathan, and you're sorry, you know about this because the three of us keep in touch quite frequently, is that you have to be intentional. Like, yes, there are. I can scroll through my Instagram feed and I can see the people that are like rearranging their closet, or like painting, like their apartment, or like learning a new language. Okay, let's be real though. But I mean, there's a lot of us that are still also quite busy. I mean, I've been sharing with my colleagues that, with my colleagues and with my students, I'm just as busy as I would be as if I was in the office.
Yep.
This time can also fly by. Like, I when we first went into this, I wondered, I was like, is it only going to be a few weeks? Are we going to be back in April? What's going to happen? And then as it kept getting extended, the extrovert in me was like, oh my gosh, it's going to feel like forever. We're already on April 29. I'm quite surprised about that. So intentional, what I'm getting at is being intentional about the practices that you want to do. So like for example, intentionally setting aside time that you're going to contact your friends. I've reconnected with people that I have been meaning to for a long period of time, but I just haven't gotten around to it. Scheduling like, Zoom sessions or like, something else like using like social media or whatever, to make those connections. For me, and you both know this, I also had to limit my social media intake and especially my news intake. I was
Mm.
getting like, okay, Governor Newsom is saying something. We're getting all sorts of stuff from DC, like all this stuff. I'm like, okay, I can't anymore. It's like and people are like conflicting with each other. So like, those kind of things I think are going to be important. And also being kind to myself, like I've gotten to a point where I'm like, you know what? We're in incredible times. And, for me to be like, okay, as a result of this, like I'm going to, you know, I'm eating like all my snacks or like, doing all those kind of things where I'm like, what am I going to look like, after? And I'm like, who cares? Because you know what? I mean, this is extraordinary times and I need to like be gentle with myself and all of that. I recommend keeping a schedule. Like, if I didn't like, like get ready and like, if I was like I tried one day to like do all my work and everything and just like lounge around. Oh no, that didn't work for me. So, and I also want to say this too, because I've seen also like a lot of social media posts about using this time to figure out your future and, acquiring a new skill and everything. Take your time, do what you need to for
Mm.
yourself. I mean, while that can be helpful, sure, maybe, I also want to encourage people to think about their coping in the sense of like, are you avoiding certain things? It's very easy for you to jump into something as a coping mechanism, such as, you're going to learn a particular language or you're going to do whatever. But, like, is something else that you maybe need to consider and to just be vulnerable for the people that are safe in your life. The one thing I've been very concerned about for people within the LGBTQ community and other marginalized populations is safety, So when you feel like you're having a low day, or if your safety is in question, who can you contact and what are those places that you'd be able to get support during this time?
Absolutely. I'm really glad that you highlighted that because, I've seen some email threads come through about, like AA and NA, a lot of folks are turning back to, substance abuse if that was an issue for them before because it was familiar and it's a way of, kind of escaping a lot of the uncertainty and anxiety during this, it can be a really scary time for a lot of folks, especially if you're struggling financially, if you're isolated, which unfortunately far too many LGBT people are. So I really like that you mentioned reaching out to people, making sure that you have that support network, that you have some resiliency built into your your community that you're tapping in. Yeah, thank you. Ishara, what are your self care tips during these unprecedented times?
Oh, mercy. Like Naveen, I don't have the luxury of working from home right now because
Oh,
I still have to go into a campus. It's a residential campus, so we're considered an essential business, and we have kids, 30 plus kids that live on campus, so we can't just abandon them. Um, but I've seen the direct impact it's had on them. They're very, very just their anxiety's gone up, their depression's gone up. Because they're isolated and their substance use has gone up, all that kind of stuff has gone up. So what I try to do in this time is go home. I try to go home at a decent time, spend some time with myself, have a moment to recoup and do something that I love to do. I love to write letters. So that's been how I've been communicating with people, um, and enjoying that. And it's cathartic for me just to be like, here's what's going on, and pretend I'm writing in a Jane Austen movie or something. Be like, I'm in the window writing to you at dawn, like, and it's fun for me. And people love getting snail mail right now, especially because we're not going anywhere. So it's really lovely to just get a letter in the mail. I know I love it. So there's
and
pen
supporting
pal
our wonderful
happening.
post office.
Absolutely. That's right. I went out and bought a bunch of like stamps just to help. And I was like, oh, get all the stamps. I write a lot. Let's do that. And some really pretty stamps too. And I, I, I try to rest more than anything, interestingly enough. And I think people, it's funny because in the denomination that we were raised in, excuse me, it's been a long day. In the denomination we were raised in, Sabbath is such a huge concept. And as I've looked at the world, the word Sabbath means rest, Shabbat. It's something that a Jewish Sabbatarians observe it. So the Jewish religion, Seventh-day Baptist, Seventh-day Adventist, a lot of Sabbatarian denominations and religions, they observe a day of rest. And it's this mentality that work demands rest so that you can continue to work. We are such a productivity-centric society in the United States, in the Western world. We are so productivity-focused. There are cultures that honor exhaustion. We honor exhaustion.
Mm.
We honor the person who is so beat they collapse when they get in the door. Why? Because they make more money? Because they have more power, status? For what? They don't enjoy life in the ways that are the most meaningful, which is time with the people you love, time with yourself. Simplicity is really so amazing. And this may sound horrible, but I've liked the pace we've been at. I'm not gonna lie. I'm an ambivert. So my extrovert's like, oh, people. But I go to work every day, so I get to see people. And then my introvert's like, all right, I'm going home now. And I don't want to see people for another like week.
Recharge
Oh
those
wait,
social
I'm not gonna go
batteries.
anywhere. Uh-oh. Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm cool with not seeing people, but this can't last forever, right? So I've allowed myself to rest in a way I probably haven't before, knowing that, well, can't plan anything, can't go anywhere, just focusing on work and focusing on myself in very simple ways, watching something I want to watch, or just sitting and reading after work, or just not doing anything. Just not doing anything. And I know for those who are in quarantine and not at work, it can be very difficult. And something I was thinking about earlier today exactly about this topic was, for everybody so productivity centric, oh, we have to be learning something or doing something, like Naveen was saying. What if the things you're learning and doing are all about you, or all about yourself? And what if you're meeting yourself for the first time? What if you're meeting the new you, because you in grad school, you in undergrad, you in high school is so different than who you are now, and you've never taken the time to really get to know yourself where you are now? So what if that's the work you're doing? What if you're processing the fact that you don't know what to do? That's okay. You don't have to come up with some brand new skill at the end of this, but I highly suggest that this is an opportunity you'll never have again, probably, because you might not take it again for yourself. People have done this and taken time for themselves. Like, go have a sabbatical, take a month off, and go wander the hills or something, backpack across the world. But this is an opportunity you'll have to just sit and be still. And when do we do that? When do we do that? We always need to produce something at the end. And I remember at an old job, my coworkers and I would say, your worth is not based on your productivity. Your worth is not based on your productivity, because it always felt like it was. But that is something I think we need to remember right now. Our worth is not based on our productivity. If we come out of this having learned how to crochet or knit or a new language, cool. I'm glad you did that. That's something you did. But we cannot demand that of other people. That's all. It's okay. It's okay if you did that. I am proud of you if you did that. And if you didn't do that, I'm proud that you made it through today. Because I understand people have a hard enough time getting out of bed as it is, if they have depression or anxiety and different things, which I myself experience. And those days are hard. I still have to go to work, no matter, I've taken mental health days off, plenty of them. And going through this, I definitely, my heart hurts for my global siblings that are experiencing this with no outlet, being stuck at home with people who are not encouraging or supportive of them in multiple ways. whether they're queer or not. But I can only imagine my trans, brothers and sisters, and think of them if they're not having people. The only way they could get out of the home was their school or their
Yeah.
jobs, and that hurts. And I see my kids that I work with, they're sick and tired of being stuck on campus. They had school before, they could see people before, now they can't. And so, they run away all the time, which puts the community at risk, because then they come back onto campus and who knows where they've been. And now we're wondering, okay, have they gotten infected or anything like that? So it makes everybody very, very nervous. But the biggest, most important thing for me is that we need to be taking care of each other. And the way to cope for me best is really just focusing on that. How am I, like you said, be kind to yourself. How are you taking care of yourself? How are you taking care of your community? The simplest little ways. How are you reaching out for your own sanity? I don't have a lot of energy at the end of the day to reach out to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I'll sit down and I'll write out in my journal, or I'll just watch a movie and not think about anything. Honestly, I've been watching a lot of Grey's Anatomy. We hadn't seen it before. We're in season 12 now. But learn to enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
And it'll be hard, but learn to enjoy yourself. And I think that's honestly the most healing thing anybody could do, the most productive thing anybody can do in their life. Being your own friend. Because then it's not that hard to be alone with yourself. If this ever happens again, God forbid.
Oh.
But in
Yeah.
general, some people can't stand being alone, but understand and loving yourself and enjoying your own company. Truly understanding what it means to love yourself. Truly understanding what that means. Some great books that I've been reading about it. And over the past year, it takes me forever to get through a book because I'm always busy. But yeah,
I think that's
say,
wonderful.
yeah.
Because, like, I'm glad you brought that up, that it's not safe for everyone, to shelter at home, because we've at the center, we've been trying to host as many of our virtual groups that we would hold in person, and hearing from our youth director that, some of our youth are like, hey, we don't really feel like we can join the group this week because, we live in a really small apartment and my parent is not accepting, or they don't know that I'm trans or genderqueer,
Right.
and so I can't out
Right.
myself, but I want that community. So yeah, my heart's definitely with those people.
Yeah. I mean, I'll
Adrian,
be completely just a second, I'll be completely, being completely vulnerable. I myself, I can't have this conversation inside the house because I don't want to be disrespectful to my family. I'm in the backyard. That's why I'm in the backyard and not inside the house and out in the dark, because I want to be respectful of them, and I also want to be able to have this conversation because I think it's important. But it
Yeah.
needs to be a private conversation. And so I completely understand what those people are going through in that sense.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that, and again, thank you for joining us from your backyard. I wish I was somewhere down in Southern California, enjoying those Santa Ana breezes while we're out on the back patio. We'll do that after this pandemic is over.
There we will. We
But
definitely will.
I look forward to it. Adrian, I understand that there's a question from some of the audience members. Did you want to ask that to Naveen and Yashara?
Yeah. So one of the questions that came up was, give me one second. So here it is. So what can white LGBTQ of faith do to make QTPOC feel more welcome at an event or church?
Yeah, Adrian, white LGBT.
So I think, yeah. So I think what it is, so to like how to, so one thing we've been doing is we've been working with affirming faith-based organizations, right? So their question is, how do we become more welcoming? How do we become more inviting? How do we make it more comfortable for folks to come in and feel part of their community? So I think that's where the question is. I may be wrong, but that's what I'm assuming. So yeah.
Yeah, just it sounds like an allyship kind of question, like how to be a better ally. Yeah. You want to take that, Naveen? Go for it. I know you got something to say, girl. Let it out. Let it out.
This could be a whole Zoom. This could be a
Ooh,
whole
that
Zoom
could be.
topic on its own.
Honestly, it could be. You know, it could.
No, I know, yeah.
I mean, in a nutshell, I mean, honestly, is um, to really meet the person where they're at. I mean, I just being brief here, to meet the person where they're at, and to also recognize the personhood of who they are, the multiple all the identities that they hold, and how that makes up who they are. I mean, there is something definitely to be said. Like, for example, if you go to a church that has diversity, meaning you see diverse people, some of it may be yourself, some of it may be people who identify similarly to you, but even just other places where you see folks who look different in many ways. So, like, sometimes when I go to a church and I see, like, for example, like the congregation, and I can tell, okay, so this is kind of like the makeup of who is there. But even if it's things like, for example, in advertisements, if it's something like in a church program where I see like either language or like some type of like outreach to the community, to other different people that are there, that like maybe perhaps, you know, those kind of things make me go, okay, this church has like an outreach and mission kind of something that's out there, that kind of gives me that clue, not to proselytize, but more like to meet the needs and to be there. In terms of you know, LGBT affirming is just, again, even in the languaging of like who is welcome, and so forth. So when I see a church that, like, you know, makes statements, I will say, because I've gone to places and I've seen places where like all are welcome, everyone is valued, and I'm like, but really though, is that really the case? And so then, you know,
All
like
except some.
I'm like looking for, I'm looking for different ways that those could be done. Like, you know, what exactly does that mean? So sometimes it may be, even if somebody who meets me, or even if it's something on a website, you know, that I'm like, okay, you know, this kind of gives me a little bit of an understanding. But yeah, I want to caution churches that do something just as a means of, like, we want everybody there. I want to have my, this could go into a whole different conversation around tokenism, because I've seen some well-meaning people that are like, well, you know, like, we have this homeless ministry, which is great, awesome, fantastic, but like, are you meeting the person where they're at and giving them the needs that they need to be? Similarly, like with um people from different cultures and things like that, they're like, we have our annual international day, and I'm like, great, but like, what do you do the other 364 days of the year? You know what I mean? And like,
True facts.
and I love, like, I've been seeing a lot more churches, and I've seen it more up in the Bay Area than here in Southern California, around Pride Month, that do something pride oriented. But then I say, well, what are you doing all the other 11 months out of the year? You know what I mean? And I don't want to make it sound like as someone who does a lot of social justice work and stuff like that, I have colleagues who are like, it needs to be like that 24/7. And I'm not trying to say that that needs to be the case, but it doesn't need to be just one day a year or 1 month out of the year too. So what is your ongoing outreach, and what is it that you do, and how do you make spaces feel welcome?
Well, thank you. I think that was a really, really good answer to, obviously a very complex question that we could spend a lot more time on. So I'm sorry we couldn't pay more attention to it this evening. But I do want to be mindful of time, just because we're a little bit over what we had said we were going to be doing. Adrian, were there any follow-up questions that you had for Naveen and Yashara before we close?
Um, Not really, not ones that will take a few minutes. And I do want to respect your all time. I'm hoping maybe in the future we can do this, or maybe you know, we can talk about this, or yeah, we can have something like this later on, because oh, definitely, I have a whole list of stuff.
I think one of the upcoming topics that we've talked about too was around language and culture specifically. So I mean that might be an area where we could revisit some of this. So I'm excited about this series. Thank you to you both for being our our test subjects for this. I hope that the I hope that the streaming is this is new to me to be doing home studio broadcasting. So thank you for bearing with me. But I really appreciate you taking the time tonight. I really enjoyed the feedback that we got from both of you, from both your professional and personal experiences. Thank you for being vulnerable and for sharing such heartfelt information. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure our audience did as well. And thank you to everyone who's watching on the live stream, or I see Terry and Marletta have joined us on here, so thank you to you both. And any final thoughts before we close?
Thank you for the invitation. It's been fun.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity. And I just want to say that I really appreciate the work that you all are doing. You're right; there are not many centers that I'm aware of. And again,
Right.
it's just, I mean, uh, I was just even thinking here in Southern California, I don't know of any of the LGBT centers that are also exploring faith and
Right.
sexual and gender identity. I mean, I have not seen that. So I just
Yeah.
appreciate the work that you all are doing, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, y'all. I appreciate it. Thank you for being there.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure. And we'll have you back sometime soon, I'm sure. And thank you, Adrian, again for doing this work on the project. And yes, everyone stay safe, take good care, and have a good evening.